in Adam. That's the point here of Romans 5. Through one man, sin and death came into the whole world. But again, people squirm under this. They say, wait a minute. I didn't choose my representative. Well, let's look at that for a minute. Can you imagine if King George listened to the protests of the colonists who were saying no taxation without representation? He said, oh, you don't feel like you're adequately represented? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a representative. It's going to be my brother. And he appoints his brother to represent us. How would we scream about that? We'd say, wait a minute, that's no good. Because we would have no confidence that our interests would be represented by a representative that was chosen for us by somebody else. That's why we want to be able to elect our own representatives who govern over us. But do you see the complaint here? It's built into our American democratic heritage. How can it be just for God to appoint one man to represent all kinds of people, and the people don't even have a voice in that election? But there's a big difference between King George and God. When God selects your representative, he makes that selection infallibly. He makes that selection impeccably. Nowhere in time and space have you ever been more perfectly represented than you were in the Garden of Eden by the representative that God selected to act in your place. And if that be true, we can never curse God and say, it's not fair, because if I was there, I would have done something different. When we complain about being misrepresented by Adam, all we do is prove the perfection of that representation as we manifest our fallen nature, our Adamic nature, when we complain against God for that. Also for the Christian who doesn't like that and who objects to having a representative in the fall and makes that objection in principle, saying it is never appropriate for God to accept the representation of one person for another. If you want to hold to that principle consistently, then you must not only reject any identification between you and Adam, but you would have to reject equally any representation of you by Christ. The principle of representation, dear friends, is at the very heart and soul of our salvation. So be careful if you reject that idea in principle, because if you do, you've rejected your only hope of salvation.